Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome you to a new League of Legends video. As promised in my previous top 5 AP mids video, I did say I will make a top 5 underrated AP mids. The point of this video is to try and bring out some new champions to the middle lane, champions that you almost never see, and for whatever reason I'm not 100% sure, because I honestly think each and every one of these champions is quite viable and is honestly quite strong. Now remember, these are champions that are just simply underrated, champions you almost never see, or at least I personally never see. So with that said, and take this as somewhat of a disclaimer, champions like Ahri, Lissandra, Syndra, etc. are not included in this list because I simply don't consider them underrated. I do think that they are picked a lot more than the champions that I will be listing in this video, with maybe some exceptions to one of the champions that I will mention in this video. But with all that said, I hope you guys will enjoy the champions I have picked out, maybe even pick up one of these champions and try practicing them and maybe even maining them, because I honestly think they are very strong. So let us go straight to the number 5 pick. In this spot, I decided to put Malahar. This is a champion that I'm honestly quite shocked that has not been played since I think even season 2. He was extremely popular way in the olden days, but he just simply lost flavor and no one almost ever picks him up, while I still think that he's a very solid champion. I mean, he has great wave pushing with his E. Not only does it push waves very well, but of course it also gives back mana, which is overall just great sustain. When you use enough abilities, of course, it's summon the Voidling, which will attack the target that has your E on it, which will push the wave even better. Or if you're going on the champion, then the Voidling will do a lot of damage to them. His ultimate has a 130% AP ratio, assuming you get the full duration on a target. That's absurd amount of damage, especially if you combo in with his other skills like the E, the Q, the W, and then the ultimate. You will absolutely shred through almost anyone, tanks included. So that being said, his W does do percent damage with of course AP ratios as well, which obviously means that it's very strong against tanks, making him one of the few mages that actually has very good potential to shred through a tank, and of course the tanks will usually be going for targets like yourself, the AP mage. His Q, his W, and his E all have very solid ratios. I don't think any of them is less than 0.7. And on top of this, his Voidling is extremely strong. If you combo your skills correctly and you summon your Voidling just as you start the ultimate on your target and it begins attacking them, because it should due to your E being on top of that target, it will add so much more damage. Of course, the negative thing about this champion is that not only must he stand still to use his ultimate, but Quicksilver Sash does somewhat counter it. He doesn't have any built-in escapes, which if a target gets on you can be a little annoying to get away from them. And his Q is really his only spell that has any form of range in terms of Great Harass. But other than that, I honestly think Malahar is a very solid mage and is just simply completely underlooked. In the number 4 spot, I decided to put one of the most evil Yordles in existence, Vear. I'm honestly quite shocked that this champion is just so underplayed. I mean, he has one of the strongest bursts in the game. I mean, at rank 3, his ultimate has 500 flat damage. It has a 120% AP ratios on it, and on top of that, it adds 80% of the target's ability power to it as well, probably making it the deadliest single target non-skill shot oriented ability in the game. Now imagine combining this with DFG. The damage is just absurd. He has one of the probably best stuns for a mage in this game, though of course it can be a little awkward to use if you're not used to it, but a person that is very good with this stun can really utilize it to extreme potential. Now this stun fits perfectly in his kit because he has so much burst potential, not just with his ultimate, but his Q and his W, which also have extremely high base damage and AP ratios. So landing the stun, following up with a W, Q, and ultimate, and of course DFG if you have it, is simply a perfect setup. He has very good scalability, all thanks to his Q, because his Q will give him AP every single time you kill a minion. It will give you more if you kill a larger minion or monster, and it will give you 5 AP whenever you get a kill on a champion, no matter what ability you use or how you kill them. So overall, probably one of the burstiest and most deadliest mages in the game. Some of the cons is the fact that I think his passive is not very good, since technically any champion in the game for about 800 gold can also get this passive if they get Chalice of Harmony. He doesn't have the best AoE damage since his W is the only thing and it has a long delay. Just like with Malahar and a lot of other champions that I will be mentioning on this list, he does not have any innate escapes such as a dash. And on top of this, his laning phase is a bit weak. However, if you get past the laning phase, if you just don't get camped or something of the sort, and if you farm somewhat decently, you will scale so well into late game and you will just be one-shotting the mages. So overall, a very underlooked Yordle. Definitely try to pick him up. Jumping to the number 3 spot, I decided to put Twisted Fate. Now this was the champion that I was mentioning at the beginning of the video that is a little bit of an exception because I don't think he's super underrated, at least nowhere near as much as the other champions that I will be mentioning and already have mentioned. He's beginning to see a resurgence, and for very good reason. They finally changed his W back to more or less how it used to be, giving you more time to hold the card rather than only having a little bit of time holding the card but having more time deciding the card. I used to main this champion quite a bit back in the days, and I really am glad that I can probably start playing him again. He's probably one of the most mobile casters in this game. What I love about TF, and the same reason why I love someone like LeBlanc, is the fact that he has options with his W. He can choose a different card for a different situation, which is always a good thing because having more options leads to just a greater kit overall. Another thing that makes him extremely strong is the fact that his Q does not get reduced in damage for each target or minion that it passes through. And I honestly think this is the main reason why TF is just so good. He also has one of the most infamous single auto attack burst abilities in this game. And that is of course combining his Lich Bane and his W. Or if you on top of that take into account that you can also have his E procced on that same auto attack, you will be absolutely chunking a single target with just that one single auto attack. Getting some CDR on this champion will make his W have really low cooldown, which will have him have a very short CD stun, or AoE slow. He can also give himself mana in the laning phase thanks to the blue card, which also gives him great sustain. And then of course you have one of the best ultimates in the game for a mage, being able to teleport across the map, giving him extreme global pressure, which is good in solo queue and in team play. The negatives of this champion is just like all the other champions, he has no innate escapes. He's very reliant on landing the Qs because if you miss it, that's almost half your damage gone. But normally this should be combined with a gold card, which overall should not make this much of a problem. And the last part is that he has somewhat of a weak laning phase as well, making him pretty easy to bully in the lane. But once you get to a certain amount of AP, you can clear a full wave with one red card and one Q, which is where you really begin to shine. I really think this is the champion that every single AP mid laner should know how to play because he requires a lot of focus, and if you can play this champion flawlessly, then any other champion should really not be all that difficult. In the number 2 spot, I decided to put Karma. This is the champion that Bjergsen recently brought out in the LCS and was somewhat dominant with it. This champion is made to win the lane because she technically has no ultimate, but at the same time she also does. But she has it pre-6. So with this and using the mantra to its full potential, you can have extremely high pressure in the lane, and ganking her is very difficult as well. Kind of what I mentioned with TF and somewhat LeBlanc, having a great kit means having a lot of choices. Karma has just that. Since you can mantra any one of her 3 abilities, all depending on the situation, and each one will give you different benefits. For instance, a lot of the times you will want to mantra your W, especially in the lane, because it will give you so much HP back while the tether is still on them and the second time when it actually snares them. This can be very annoying to deal with for the enemy champion that is laning against you. Even more so when you combine it with summon or heal. Her mantra shield in teamfights is also very useful because not only does everyone get a shield, but they get a large amount of move speed, which is quite essential for positioning in a teamfight or chasing / escaping. The burst damage on her mantra Q is also immense, making her have very strong poke, and on top of this, if you hit both parts of it, it will easily chunk a squishy champion down to half HP. It's almost like a Nidalee spear. The cons of Karma is that she can get outscaled by certain AP mids because she has no real ultimates, which usually shouldn't be too much of a factor, especially considering how much of an advantage you should have coming out in the laning phase. And the other part is, of course, she is really reliant on her mantra, and this ability does have somewhat of a long cooldown, which can make it a little bit annoying at times, but you do have to play very aggressive on her because auto attacks and whenever you hit an enemy champion with spells will reduce its cooldown. Overall, a very solid champion, has extremely high pressure in the lane, very hard to kill, has a lot of poke, great benefits to the team, and overall just a solid underplayed choice. And finally, going to the first place spot, the champion that I believe is the most underrated for how good he really is, Zera. This is the champion that ever since his rework, I was a little suspicious at first, but as I played him more, I began to realize just what exactly they did with him. And let's just say I approve. However, this champion is so underplayed for how good he is that if I ever pick him, people even sometimes question, why are you picking this champion? This really does make me sad, and I hope a lot more people will begin to see his potential. So let's talk about what makes him so good. He of course does have very long range with his Q and overall just most of his abilities, especially his ultimate. Each of his abilities does have very solid AP ratios other than his E, but it does have a 2-second stun. His ultimate at rank 3, if he hit all 3 shots, does have 900 base damage and 130% AP ratios. So if you are unaware, that is quite a bit of damage. Like I mentioned earlier, his E does have a very useful stun, which is great at picking off a single target. His W has an absurd amount of damage if you hit it in the center while also applying a slow. But this is where his stun comes in to ensure that you do land it in the center. What I really love about Zera's kit is that every single ability that he has does damage, and very good damage at that. A lot of other champions like Vear, they have just an ability that is just for the stun, or just for the slow, or just for a silence, or something of the sort. However, this champion hits hard with every ability. His passive is what Vear wishes he has. It actually gives back a lot of mana, burst mana if you will, which is very noticeable in lane and is great sustain. Almost like a TF blue card. And naturally, he has very solid wave clear and good siege potential. The cons of this champion is that he also has no real escapes and he is purely skill shot oriented. But if you can land his abilities, you will just shred through people. So Zera is probably the most underplayed champion for how strong I honestly think he is. And I really hope more people will begin to see his potential. So that is it for this video, guys. These are the top 5 champions that I feel like are the most underrated but yet are very strong. I really hope you guys have learned something new, maybe are even going to pick up at least one of these champions. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please throw in a like if you did enjoy this, and also follow me on my Facebook and Twitter, and I hope to see you next time. Peace!